W5.
I believe it's to blame for the extreme rage.
Abandoned warriors fight an unseen enemy.
My life feels like it's in shambles.
They poisoned a generation of their own soldiers.
These people suffered in hell every goddamn day, and nobody did anything about it.
And
nobody has ever lived a hockey life like he has.
the winningest coach in hockey history.
Never look back. Never look back.
His mind works at a different pace than everybody else.
I was there to try to win.
CTV's W5 with Avery Haines, Rick Westhead, Peter Ackman, and Sandy Ronaldo. Here is Avery Haines.
Welcome to W5. They accuse the Canadian government of poisoning them while on missions in Somalia, Rwanda, and Afghanistan. 900 Canadian veterans have now signed up to an unprecedented legal action after being forced to take an inexpensive anti-malaria drug that they claim has destroyed their lives. And in a W5 exclusive, a Canadian hero, retired General Romeo Dallaire, has just added his name to the lawsuit, joining veterans like Richard Schumann, who say the drug nearly killed them.
I took a 9mm sidearm. I cocked the action. Then I put the barrel into my mouth. As I put my teeth down on the barrel, I remember feeling my finger on the trigger, and I was slowly squeezing the trigger, and I could hear the action starting to move back, and the action went off. Bang!
Richard Schumann is reliving a night of horror at the Canadian Forces military base in Kandahar, Afghanistan, July 19th, 2005.
I felt the bullet punch through the back of my neck. I felt the tear of the skin, and I could see the smoke coming out of the pistol. I could smell the gunpowder. And as I'm looking into the mirror, I'm wiggling my finger through the hole in the back of my neck. I can see the reflection in the mirror up through the hole in my neck of a farmer's field with cows grazing, saying to myself, well, this is no good. Now everybody's going to know I attempted suicide.
Richard Schumann did not attempt suicide that night. None of what he just described actually happened. It was a nightmare so vivid that Richard almost made it a reality.
When you wake up in the morning after this horrifying dream, you didn't realize how close you had come to actually taking your own life.
No, not at all. When my fire team partner woke me up. And at that point, I had my service rifle in my hand and the action cocked. If it wasn't for my fire team partner, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today, because I would have reenacted everything and spun that barrel into my mouth and killed myself in that tent. It wasn't the Taliban that was going to kill me. It was damn near me that took my own life because of a goddamn drug that they chose to poison us with.
They is the Canadian military. The drug is mefloquine, designed to protect against a potentially deadly strain of malaria. It was issued to soldiers on missions where malaria was rampant: Somalia, Rwanda, and Afghanistan. Not only was it cheaper, it was more efficient. Soldiers only had to take a pill once a week instead of daily.
And this was when we were flying in for the first time to Afghanistan.
You look a little scared. You must have been scared.
I was petrified. I really was. But I mean, you know, I believed in what I knew. I believed in the training I had. I believed in everybody that was with us. But it's hard not to be afraid.
Yeah.
Amidst the photos and the commemorations, Richard has also kept his diary from the night he almost died by suicide.
3 nights ago, I tried to commit suicide. Time to see the doctor. Considering I have a rifle and 150 rounds for it, shit could get nasty.
Diary entries that document the drug's powerful side effects that he and others were experiencing.
28th of June, 2005, Mark woke up at 1:20, screamed at the top of his lungs, and it scared the shit right out of me. Yet again, he had another bad dream.
The immediate impact of taking mefloquine was so well known that soldiers had special nicknames for the day of the week when they had to swallow the little white pill.
It was either Manic Monday, Terror Tuesday, Wacky Wednesday, or Fearful Friday, you know.
And what was happening on those days that were given names like Wacky Wednesday and Terror Tuesday?
The dreams were just so vile and so haunting. A lot of troops were lashing out and frustrated and very, very angry.
Night terrors, rage, paranoia, psychosis, searing stomach pains, all a result of taking mefloquine, which is sold under the brand name Lariam. Some of the symptoms were even listed deep in the drug manufacturer's own warning label. But Richard Schumann says he was never told by his superiors about the potential for serious harm. And he claims the effects of the drug lasted long after he stopped taking them, more than a decade ago.
What are you experiencing right now that you attribute mefloquine to?
I believe it's to blame for the extreme rage. I believe it's to blame for the tinnitus. I believe it's to blame for the vertigo. I believe it's to blame for me losing countless nights of sleep, being afraid to go to sleep. The whole mefloquine thing is a diabolical disaster.
Retired Sergeant Richard Schumann is not alone in his claims that the drug meant to protect him from malaria has destroyed his life.
I want to get better. I don't want these feelings at 3 o'clock in the morning.
One by one, former soldiers at this town hall in Kingston, Ontario, stand up to share their suffering.
I'm Sergeant Mike Rood, retired. 27 years ago, I took mefloquine, and my life feels like it's in shambles, but...
This veteran drove across the country from Newfoundland to be here.
And thanks to Paul Miller and his team for taking the fight for us, because some of us can't do it anymore.
The person retired Sergeant Mike Rood is thanking and hugging is Paul Miller, one of the lawyers behind a massive and unprecedented legal action against not the manufacturer of the drug, Hoffmann-La Roche, but against the Canadian government and the military who forced soldiers to take it.
Mefloquine always had side effects including anxiety, depression, suicidal and homicidal thoughts, paranoia, delusions, and hallucinations. These side effects were not hidden by Hoffmann-La Roche. That's why we are not suing Hoffmann-La Roche.
Paul Miller has been holding town halls like these from coast to coast over the past few months, inviting veterans to take part in a mass tort, which is similar to a class action, but gives each veteran the right to accept or refuse any possible settlement. The legal action alleges the government has and continues to, on both an individual and systemic level, willfully deny and conceal the risks posed by mefloquine.
What's your biggest legal challenge when it comes to taking on the Canadian government?
They're going to argue this is PTSD. This isn't from mefloquine.
You're going to have to prove that the effects are caused by mefloquine and not PTSD.
That's right. Now, there's going to be overlap, but there are telltale signs of mefloquine toxicity PTSD does not have. Tinnitus is one. The gastrointestinal issues is another. The types of dreams could be another.
The drug may be marketed under the brand name Lariam, but Dr. Remington Nevin, a world expert on mefloquine toxicity with Johns Hopkins University in the US, has another name for it.
You call it a horror movie in a pill.
I call it a horror movie in a pill for good reason, because the effects of this drug you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. But this would be a big issue scientifically.
Dr. Nevin meets regularly with veterans like these, sharing his decade of research. He's been called as an expert witness in lawsuits in the US, has testified before the British Parliament, and is the lead medical expert in this mass tort against the Canadian government.
What does the science say about mefloquine toxicity?
Mefloquine is a neurotoxicant. We know that this drug injures and potentially even kills cells in the central nervous system.
Is it your medical belief that mefloquine can cause permanent or long-lasting effects on the brain?
Yes, mefloquine does cause permanent injury to the central nervous system in some individuals.
So far, some 3,000 veterans have expressed an interest in joining the mass tort. 900 have already signed their names to it, accusing the very government they were prepared to die in combat for of poisoning them. Richard Schumann is one of them.
I'm doing this for the loved ones of the ones that were lost, because so many of them don't have answers to why their partners killed themselves. These people took mefloquine. These people suffered in hell every goddamn day, and nobody did anything about it.
One of those who suffered in hell is a Canadian military hero, retired General Romeo Dallaire, who led the 1994 UN peacekeeping mission in Rwanda and went on to be a champion for those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, has now become the highest-ranking soldier to sign his name to this legal action. Was there a moment when you were on mission in Rwanda where you realized, oh, there is something seriously wrong with me, and I believe it's the mefloquine?
Sleeping was hard. Memory losses were coming up. Horrible stomach cramps. I mean, it was an impact that I considered serious enough that it was affecting my operational capability.
You're feeling so affected by mefloquine when you're in Rwanda that you send a message to your bosses, say, hey, we got to stop this. What do they say to you?
That if I did not continue to take mefloquine, it would be perceived as a self-inflicted wound, and I could be court-martialed.
They threatened you with court-martial if you refused to take it.
The message said that disciplinary action would be taken. Well, disciplinary action for a general is a court-martial. It was final.
A general leading an international peacekeeping mission threatened with court-martial.
I'm bringing the government to task by joining this and saying, hey, government entity, you have a covenant with me, and we believe you've got to pursue this and bring a solution to it. This is not me saying you're disloyal to me and you've abandoned me. It's saying, I think you're screwing up.
Coming up,
They manufacture doubt about the science.
was the military forcing a dangerous drug on its soldiers?
The government refused to own what they've done.
When W5 continues.
Mike Rood is a man on a mission.
I'm traveling across the country to just to spread awareness about mefloquine.
The veteran has spent the last 3 months crisscrossing Canada in this truck with his therapy dog Spark, speaking out about the military-issued anti-malaria drug that he says poisoned him for life.
I won't stop until the government decides to settle. That's when I'll stop.
Retired Sergeant Rood was once literally a poster boy for the Army. That's him in the middle. But now Mike has joined General Romeo Dallaire,
All right, let's go.
Richard Schumann, and nearly 900 other veterans across the country in an unprecedented lawsuit against the Canadian government and military. The claim that the anti-malaria drug mefloquine has left them with permanent injuries, ringing in the ears, dizziness, rage, sleeplessness, memory loss, and suicidal thoughts.
I had tried to take my life a year and a half ago. And then I tried a year before that. I'm a mountain ops instructor, right? I know how to tie dozens of knots. I didn't know how to tie a noose. So I Googled it, and I tied a noose, and I tied it to the ceiling in my shed, because I didn't want to do this anymore.
It was a turning point in Mike Rood's life. He's now dedicated to spreading the word about mefloquine, a drug that has been steeped in controversy for decades.
I'm terrified that guys are getting treated for PTSD, but if they took mefloquine, they could be at risk for the suicidal ideation. And that's what scares me, and it's suicidal ideation that has got me on the road.
More than 1,000 veterans have died by suicide since the military first started using mefloquine. There's no way of knowing just how many of those deaths may be connected to the drug. W5 first raised the alarm about the anti-malaria drug way back in the 1990s.
Mefloquine. It's a drug used to prevent a deadly strain of malaria, and it can be a lifesaver. But it's also a drug that can have frightening side effects.
When Canada first sent troops to Somalia in 1992, mefloquine was experimental. It hadn't yet been approved for use in Canada. As W5 first exposed back then, the military made a deal with the drug company Hoffmann-La Roche. The drugs would be supplied to the Canadian military as part of what was supposed to be a strictly monitored clinical trial.
Health Canada sanctioned a special mefloquine safety study. That meant the only way Ottawa's Defence Headquarters could use this experimental drug legally was under the controlled conditions of the study. Here's the document.
But that study was never conducted. Not only were the side effects not documented by the Defense Department, but the soldiers in Somalia weren't even told that they were part of an experimental trial. All of this in a mission that spiraled out of control. Somalia was an unmitigated disaster. There was an unusually long list of tragedies on the Canadian base, 24 accidental firings, including a bullet that killed one soldier. But the most alarming and one of the ugliest moments in Canadian military history was photographed for the world to see. A Somali teen named Shadain Aron, who had snuck onto the base, was tortured and killed by members of the Canadian Airborne Division. One soldier who witnessed the brutality says the ringleader, Master Corporal Clayton Matchie, was hallucinating at the time. 2 days later, Matchie tried to kill himself and was left severely brain damaged. Now, when the murder of the Somali teen happened is key. It was on Terror Tuesday, the day Matchie's unit took mefloquine, a drug that was dispensed by the military and was supposed to be tracked by the military.
You gave them a drug that was not approved, and you did so under the guise that it was part of a clinical trial.
Not one of the violent incidents in Somalia was ever documented in the so-called clinical trial. And the following year, in 1993, mefloquine went on to be approved in Canada. It became the go-to medication for Canadian troops sent to countries with a malaria problem, including Rwanda and Afghanistan.
It should have been discontinued. As soon as one of those guys or women have one of these horrible hallucinations or dreams.
In 1995, a public inquiry was ordered into the botched peacekeeping mission in Somalia. It was slated to explore the role that mefloquine may have played. But just before that phase was to begin,
that closes the hearings.
The government prematurely shut the inquiry down. All these years later, veterans like Mike Rood are still demanding answers. For the past 3 years, veterans have been holding a rally on Parliament Hill, speaking out against mefloquine. The issue was recently raised at a Veterans Affairs Committee set up to investigate mefloquine toxicity in the military. The lead medical expert in the mass tort, Dr. Remington Nevin, testified at that hearing. After listening to 12 expert witnesses, the Conservatives on the committee called for a full-blown independent inquiry. But in the end, the committee tabled a report this past June simply recommending the government analyze future scientific studies commissioned by the American government.
This is the same playbook that was used by the tobacco industry, the same playbook that was used by the asbestos industry. They manufacture doubt about the science that's not in their interest. They claim more study is necessary. They say the science is incomplete. They delay action on that basis.
In 2016, Health Canada updated its warning labels for mefloquine, declaring that serious side effects can persist for months and may be permanent in some cases. That same year, in 2016, the Defense Department quietly changed its policy on mefloquine and now uses it only as a drug of last resort. But to this day, the Canadian government and the Defense Department claim that there is not enough scientific evidence to prove that the drug has any long-term side effects. W5 repeatedly requested interviews with the Minister of National Defense. That request was denied on the grounds it would be inappropriate to speak given the impending legal action. Instead, we were sent this statement. We take the health and well-being of Canadian Armed Forces members very seriously. The Canadian Forces Health Services Group will continue to monitor the scientific evidence, and any future relevant scientific research will be thoroughly reviewed and incorporated in our policy when appropriate.
Why has the Defense Department been so silent on the potential risks of mefloquine?
They poisoned a generation of their own soldiers. There's extraordinary liability here.
And if the government stands up and says, yep, we did something wrong here, it's going to cost them so much money that they're just hoping it goes away.
Yes, but when you're a veteran that signed up at 18 to serve their country, and then you're told by that very government that it's all in your head and that the drug is perfectly safe, that's an incredible betrayal.
In 2016, Germany banned its soldiers from being put on mefloquine. Australia never used the drug as a first or even second line of defense. In the US, it's been a drug of last resort since 2013. And in Ireland, mefloquine has been taken off the market completely.
When the Defense Department, when the Canadian government all say that there aren't really long-term permanent effects of mefloquine, what do you say to that?
Fine. Here's your doses. You want to play Russian roulette? You take the goddamn drug.
Richard Schumann is trying to move on with his life, but says he's waited long enough for Canada to do something about the drug he says left him permanently scarred.
Change needs to happen now. And I guarantee you, Avery, I guarantee you, because of the mefloquine toxicity, there will be more unanswered suicides because the government refused to own what they've done. Now is the time.
Mefloquine is still available to the public in Canada under the brand name Lariam. It's prescribed as a once-weekly tablet for travelers heading to countries at risk of malaria. However, Health Canada has now created a checklist to help physicians decide just who should or should not be prescribed the drug.